Episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi has arrived, and the question is, where do we begin? Flashbacks. So the episode opens up with a flashback to Anakin and Obi-Wan in a sparring session around the time of Attack of the Clones when Anakin is still a Padawan. We flash to that, I believe, 3 times throughout the episode, and we see the progression of how that duel played out. Obi-Wan is a bit wiser, and he ultimately wins this duel, but the big point here is that we finally got a flashback to the Clone Wars era. This is obviously something that a lot of fans have been clamoring for a while. It's something that people were sort of getting a little worried that we weren't going to see at all in this series, and so my message to Star Wars fans now is patience.
Patience.
I say patience.
Allow these things to play out. We're never going to understand everything after the first episode of a show. And so, on that same note, the Grand Inquisitor also returns. This is toward the end of the episode, of course, but obviously at the end of episode 2, the Grand Inquisitor was stabbed and left for dead by Reva. In this episode, he returns. Now, toward the beginning of the episode, Reva was granted the rank of Grand Inquisitor, but in the scene where the Grand Inquisitor does return, we see that she was never really being gifted that rank. It was all just sort of a plot by Darth Vader because Vader was aware that Reva wanted revenge on him. He was never really promoting her to the rank of Grand Inquisitor. He knew the Grand Inquisitor was alive, and so he was really just allowing Reva to do his dirty work, track Obi-Wan Kenobi down, and then ultimately make her decision on whether she was going to betray him or not. Either way, Vader probably would have killed her because he knew that lust for revenge over him was there, but Reva does turn on him. She tries to kill him, and he absolutely dominates her. This may have been the coolest scene in the episode, where Darth Vader doesn't even pull his own lightsaber to defend himself. He just purely uses the Force to defeat Reva, and then ultimately he takes her lightsaber, splits it in half, gives her one half, and defeats her in combat, stabs her. This is when the Grand Inquisitor returns, and they leave Reva for dead. Now, it does look like Reva is going to survive, at least until the next episode. She recovers the hologram that Bail Organa sent to Obi-Wan, the message where he reveals that he will go to Tatooine to protect Luke if he doesn't hear from Obi-Wan soon. And so now Reva knows that somebody, maybe she knows that these are Anakin Skywalker's children, but she knows that Obi-Wan and Bail are protecting Force-sensitive twins. So I'm not entirely sure where that's gonna go. It seems like Reva probably still has bad intentions. I think she may go to Tatooine in search of Luke, and ultimately we may see a duel between Obi-Wan and Reva in episode 6. Obviously, I don't think that Reva has a place in the Empire anymore. She still may run into Darth Vader as they both sort of track Obi-Wan down. I'm not entirely sure where that's going to go, but I'm definitely interested in seeing where we end up with that entire dynamic between Reva, Obi-Wan, and Vader, and the Grand Inquisitor too. Maybe the Grand Inquisitor will be the one who ultimately kills Reva, or maybe Reva will survive. Right before Vader duels Reva, we also have that moment where he's tracking Obi-Wan, and he enters the room where all of these refugees are, and just before that, Leia had managed to get the hangar bay door open, and so they were getting ready to take off, and Vader reaches out with the Force, and he rips the ship back out of the sky. This is very different than what we saw with, like, Rey in The Rise of Skywalker or Ahsoka in the Clone Wars Season 7, as Rey obviously struggled mightily to pull the ship back toward her. She probably wasn't going to be able to get it to come back at all, but we don't know because Kylo came and intervened, and then she blew the ship up with the Force lightning. And then with Ahsoka, she also had to let Maul go. That is not the case with Vader. He rips the ship back out of the sky and then starts to dismantle it with the Force. This episode, we really see Darth Vader's power on a whole new level. It's far beyond even what we saw in episode 3. His power is on full display, and Darth Vader has been fully unleashed in this series. And something that I think this series continues to do for the character of Darth Vader is make his fall to the dark side even more tragic than it already was. Obviously, we know that Anakin Skywalker was once this hopeful Jedi Knight, and now we see he's just become this ball of pure fiery hatred. And I think this series does a great job of showing us who Darth Vader has become and just how evil and hateful and ruthless he is. So I continue to applaud the team for that. That is one of the best aspects of this show in my opinion. Darth Vader has been absolutely fantastic. We also have the death of Tala Tala in this episode. That was a pretty sad scene. Obviously, she sacrifices herself to save Obi-Wan and the refugees, so that was obviously sad to see, but she went out in a way that she would not necessarily be happy with, but she went out taking a stand against the Empire, and so that's sort of somewhat of a consolation, somewhat of a feel-good message there. Obviously, the fact that she had to die for the cause was not ideal, but this is war, and sometimes these things have to happen. My final big point, as I just kind of jump all over the place in my analysis or my initial reaction to this episode, is Obi-Wan's power. Obi-Wan has become even more powerful than what we saw in last week's episode. He is clearly continuing to reconnect more and more with the Force. He was quite skilled at deflecting blaster shots with his lightsaber. He generates this massive Force push where he shoves Reva backwards. Obi-Wan is definitely geared up for another battle if that is the direction that episode 6 goes. I'm assuming that Obi-Wan and Vader are going to duel again, as that was the rumor before this episode or this series came out, was that Obi-Wan and Vader were going to fight more than once. That could just be the fact that they fought in episode 3 and then we got the flashback to the sparring session in episode 5, but I could see them fighting again, and I do still think it makes sense because I have been expecting ever since we found out that they were going to come face to face again that Obi-Wan was going to outwit or outdo Vader in some way in order to connect to their conversation in A New Hope. So we will obviously see what happens with that. As far as predictions for episode 6, I think we will hear from Qui-Gon Jinn. I obviously think Leia will be returned to Alderaan, and then unfortunately Obi-Wan and Leia will probably never see each other again until the moments before Obi-Wan dies in A New Hope. That is a really heart-wrenching thing to think about. This relationship and this bond that they've formed over the course of this series is now going to be ripped away from them, and they're probably never going to see each other again. That is part of the great tragedy of Obi-Wan's life. We just continue to add on to the sadness of this character, and so that is that. We may get a little more of Luke Skywalker in episode 6. Obviously, the closing shot was of him, and Reva now knows his location, so she may head back to Tatooine and maybe have another run-in with Uncle Owen. Remember in episode 1, she said next time when she was threatening his life and she was stopped by the fifth brother, there is a chance that they will come face to face again, and then Obi-Wan will have to step in and do what he has to do. So to wrap things up, episode 5, probably my favorite episode of the season. I'd like to let it settle a little bit more, but I mean, this episode was off the charts. This is some of the best Star Wars work Disney has done. This series overall, really, I've been happy with every episode, but episode 5 was absolutely off the wall. Darth Vader, Reva, Obi-Wan, Leia, it's all been fantastic. Reva's backstory is something that I'm really happy with. And again, in those flashbacks, we saw Darth Vader storming the Jedi Temple and coming in and brutally murdering these children. Again, Darth Vader just continues to become even more and more menacing and heartless and evil. And that parallel where he's standing over Reva in his suit, like in real time in this episode, in comparison with him standing over her as a youngling at the Jedi Temple, was very menacing, but also very well done. But that is going to wrap things up for this video. I know I was a little bit all over the place here, but this is my initial reaction. Those are my thoughts on this week's episode. So let me know what you guys thought about episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi down below. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a thumbs up to support the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and of course, may the Force be with you always.